This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. The Huskies Warming House podcast is also brought to you by the Soda Pod, home of NCAA college hockey news and more. Stay wild and up to date with new episodes throughout every week. Find them on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other podcast platforms. And welcome into the Huskies Warming House podcast. Here in the den, Nick, Max, and Noah Grand here, recording on Sunday, October 22nd, recapping the previous weekend here, Nick. I suppose before we get to men's and women's hockey, which I guess if you want to be theoretical, took 3 of 5 total over the course of the week for the men's and women's team combined, which is better than 500 if you're doing math, which we try not to do a lot of here, but nonetheless, some things to dissect on both sides of that. One team may be looking a little bit stronger than the other out of the gate, and hasn't been the team that has been accustomed to being in that position. If you're talking St. Cloud hockey, let's just put it that way. Before we get to that, though, speaking other St. Cloud hockey, Nick, it's not often you give up only 2 goals in regulation and lose 2 hockey games in a row. The St. Cloud Norsemen lose 2 against the Minot Minotauros. It was great to see you over the course of the weekend, Nick. How were the travels, and what were you up to this week?
What wasn't I up to? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So junior hockey, took the long bus ride on Thursday up to Minot with the Norsemen on I swear that bus must have been the same bus used in the filming of Miracle. I mean, it had that same, it's had that same body style and everything. Although ironically, the bus ride up was more comfortable than the 10:30 at night to 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30. That was tough, but yeah, no, 2 close games up there at Pepsi Arena. Thankful again to the Minot staff, especially Ken Oda, yourself, Noah, always great to work with that media crew. Throughout the games, actually joined you for a couple of pregame shows, which is always kind of fun. You don't really get to do that often in junior hockey, where you got broadcasters that, are essentially trying to elevate both of their teams. And, it's a friendly, competition. And as you mentioned, St. Cloud probably maybe slightly the better team on Friday at times, and then just couldn't really put it away. And then shall we say that Minot steals it in a shootout, and you could see the emotions coming from St. Cloud. They knew they let one slip away. And then Saturday, after, shall we say, half your team came back from suspension, that helps, especially when it's your second line. You could tell St. Cloud was just not the same team. They were thoroughly outplayed in that game, kept it close. Again, the goaltending for St. Cloud, both their netminders are just unbelievable. Max Wieland and trying to remember the other.
Ryan Manzella.
Yeah, Manzella. Both played out of their minds, both games. And as you mentioned, 2 goals on the weekend for Minot, both end up being game winners. And for St. Cloud, 2-1 aggregate score, right? And you lose both hockey games. It's about as close as it gets, but at least you're not the last place team in the Central Division. So we'll just leave it at that. But
yeah, certainly not. Although North Iowa did beat Aberdeen. If you're a Minot fan, that was a welcome surprise, considering that Minot essentially took 5 out of 6 on the weekend. They lost in overtime against Bismarck in a game that, ironically enough, the only Division I commit out of all the goaltenders we listed was Stephen Peck, who's going to Michigan from Bismarck, and that game was 5-4. So it was a kind of a weird feel through all 3 games, but no, it was a lot of fun. Both the St. Cloud games were really good hockey. Yeah. That Norseman team is not a bad team. I would say very, very defensively sound. They like to play a physical game. And if you're in the Granite City and you're not going to a Huskies game, I would definitely welcome probably going to a Norseman game, because the Central Division 1 through 5 is within a stone's throw of each other. It's like 3 to 5 points separating all of those in that mix, and they're all very good teams. Like you said, it's really only North Iowa that's really kind of struggled as of late. But no, it was a good time. I think that, as you alluded to, I think there's certain staffs throughout the Central Division in the NAHL that really try to work hand in hand. I would say Bismarck and Austin would be two great examples of teams that do that. Don't really know the new North Iowa guy yet, so can't really speak one way or the other. The old one who used to travel really sucked, though.
Yeah. It was terrible.
Yeah, that was Nick. That was Nick. In case anybody didn't get that and missed that reference. And then Aberdeen always comes down. That's always a big scrap too. I've had a couple of conversations with their crew, and they're a nice crew. We just don't talk to them much, I think, is probably where I would go with that. But nonetheless, 3 really great hockey games and a really fun weekend. Nick got to take you out to some food places too as well. And no Caleb, he didn't buy us dinner, so we sorted that out. We sorted that out a year ago, so I think we're good now. But
that was dead. So
that is a long bus drive. And in the meantime, kind of through it all, we were watching 4 games of Huskies hockey over the weekend, and then one women's game early on in the week that I would say, even despite the score, which is a wild thing to say about that game, still was a very great showing in addition to that score, which says a lot about the teams that we're going to talk about as always. So we're going to start on the women's side, as we do, with Center Ice View News and Notes, presented by HuskiesIllustrated.com and the Soda Pod.
Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to CenterIceView.com.
Alongside Nick Maxon here, recording at the start of the week here, late on Sunday evening, Nick. And it was almost a week ago that the St. Cloud women's team got right back at it after playing some hockey games. And it was a showing that I would say, all things considered, the Huskies should feel good about. I mean, even if you don't garner points necessarily, a very good matchup. And overall, a week for this women's team that has them sitting actually tied with Minnesota Duluth at 6 points apiece, tied for 4th place. Minnesota, meaning the Golden Gophers, have 9 points, and then Wisconsin and Ohio State 12 apiece for them. Mankato, Bemidji, St. Thomas yet to register any sort of WCHA points yet this season. So, Nick, before we get to the women's team, I suppose we could probably pull up the WCHA standings here in general and talk about the week. As we're alluding to, though, when we circle back to the women's team did get started with the Gophers on last Tuesday, and it was a very good contest. So, but yeah, WCHA wise, maybe some things that we expected, but maybe some things that are slightly surprising. We'll get to that. First of all, Ohio State beats St. Thomas 6-2 on Friday night, then Saturday 7-1. No real surprise there. That Buckeyes team, very good team there. On the other side of things, Wisconsin beating Bemidji State 4-0, maybe a bit closer than we would expect it. I would still say, even though Bemidji, for all of their offensive struggles, still has historically played a pretty sound defensive game, and they try to keep you in it at least through 40 minutes and kind of reevaluate once they get to that point. So that's kind of their approach to the process there. They lose 8-1, unfortunately, on Saturday, though. So Wisconsin, the Badgers, kind of coming out. Yeah, exactly. The one that I thought was kind of interesting, Minnesota Duluth winning 3-1 and 4-1 on the weekend in Mankato, Nick. And we talked about the strength of this Duluth team, and not to say that outscoring your opponent 7-2 in the aggregate is not, a bad weekend by any means. But I guess it just, maybe to me early on, and again, we're going off of box scores, we're going off of early season play. A lot of these things could change. I don't know. Early on, I guess I would say that Duluth is necessarily the team that is necessarily out of reach for the Huskies, like maybe we anticipated entering the season. I think 1 through 5 in the WCHA, and specifically maybe even 3 through 5 in the WCHA, could be a bit tighter than maybe we thought, even at the beginning of the season.
Well, let's, go right back to your point. It's early, right? Yeah. I think every team is still trying to find their legs a little bit. Again, we'll talk about this more and got the St. Cloud, is just a completely different team in terms of how they're playing the game. And so I don't read too much into it. I think Minnesota Duluth on paper is still a more stacked roster. I think they have more potential in that department. And who's to say that, some of these early opponents, right? Sometimes, things aren't clicking again. You got new players in the roster, maybe new line mates. You're trying to figure stuff out. So I'm not that worried about it. I'm not sure if that's, Monday morning quarterback, type discussion.
Right.
So as much as it appears that way, and I know that, we break these down week by week, it's still early for me to really, shall we say, put the lever down and say, yes, Duluth isn't as strong as we want to say it. But, shall we say that I think the conversation is more towards St. Cloud women's to say that there is a slight door that's open there that if they can continue to, shall we say, kind of transition their game the way that they have been, maybe it isn't as far of a gap as we thought. They're going to have to probably get a couple of things to go their way, but Duluth's still a strong team. I'm not too worried about it. I don't know. What do you think, Noah? I know it's easy to kind of look at these box scores as we, are looking at them right now and say, okay, 7-2, maybe we thought it should have been worse, but again, it's early and I don't know. Things are different every year.
Well, things are promising here. We mentioned the Huskies, of course. They've played only 3 WCHA games, as have the Gophers. Everybody else has played 4. And I mentioned that for a specific reason. St. Cloud, like I said, tied for 4th place, but they have 1 game in hand actually on Duluth right now. They have a .667 winning percentage. Duluth is .500, and the top 3 teams, of course, have not lost a game yet. In fact, Wisconsin, goal differential of plus 26, 27-1 is their WCHA goals for, goals against. That's pretty good. And then Ohio State, 20-5 for their differential. Minnesota, they've only given up 1 goal and they've scored 14. There's only 1 team that has found the back of the net against that Golden Gopher team this season. We might get to them in just a few moments here, but kind of gives you an idea. The Huskies have put themselves in a good spot early as far as the women's program is concerned. Well, let's talk about them right now, shall we? Of course, the women's team, like we said, in action on that Tuesday, and what a hockey game it was. And I think even though that the final, of course, Huskies travel down to Ritter Arena, play the Minnesota Golden Gophers, who ultimately are 5-0 after the weekend. They lose 2-1. And it was a great showing. The Gophers did not score a goal until the second period. Ava Lindsay from Emily Zumwinkle and Emma Kreitz at the 8:05 mark of period number 2. I mean, it took almost half a hockey game for the Gophers to even get one in the back of the net. Taylor Stewart adds an empty netter with less than a minute to go. And then with 5 seconds left, Avery Farrell, her 3rd of the season from Clara Himlerova, and Cece Bowlby got the Huskies on the board to essentially really was a 1-0 game.
Really?
All things considered, if you take out the last 2, of course, with the one with the extra attacker. Shots 31-15 in favor of the Gophers. Not the greatest for the Huskies, but that Gophers team still was a very good squad. 8-4 was the first period, 12-3 in the second for the Gophers. So they really started to make a push in that middle frame. And then 11-8, things kind of narrowing back up again in period number 3. Both teams 0-4 on the power play. Face-off wise, Huskies did not look strong in the dot. They were 21-59 in the dot. But again, things to clean up. One of the best teams, not only in the WCHA, but in the country still, let's be fair, a top 5 team, I would say at this point. Nick, JoJo Chobak stops 29 of 30, and Skylar Vetter stopped 14 of 15, and her shutout bid was ended 5 seconds before the end of regulation.
Ouch.
yeah, that's kind of tough. I think all things considered, you maybe would have liked just that extra little bit, that extra gear in this hockey game, and I think this group is capable of it. But as we've alluded to, it is early, and I thought it was a fantastic showing, especially with the quick turnaround and the fact that you've got 2 more games at the end of the week.
Well, not only that, Noah, but when you can look at the talent difference, and this is not a knock on St. Cloud by any stretch, and it's more of just to compliment that the Gophers have just had, shall I say, an embarrassment of riches for as long as they've had, right? And let's just say that in years past, when you go into a matchup against the Gophers, and again, this is not a shot at St. Cloud, but let's just say the expectations are quite different, going into a matchup with the Gophers. And granted, you can look at the face-off dot, you can look at shots on net. the fact that you were statistically out of this game, but kept it close, this is that next step in that transition to being competitive head to head against the Gophers, right? Second period, again, long change. This is where historically the Huskies have struggled against these top scoring teams like the Gophers, like Wisconsin, where you maybe get pinned into your own end, maybe for a couple of minutes at a time. And then when you finally are able to get the puck, either maybe you make a decision to ice it. If you're lucky, you can get to the red line, dump it, and get a line change. But this is where teams like the Gophers take over games, is in that second frame, right? And if you can limit the Gophers, again, you mentioned a 14-1, that's a plus 13 goal differential, and you lose by a single goal, you got yourself a chance, right? Sometimes this is how you steal a hockey game. This is how he did it last year. So, yeah, I mean, the stats don't look great, but I think if you're Brian Idalski, you would take being down by one shot anytime against one of the best teams in the nation. And yeah, always stuff to clean up. But I think you got to be pretty happy with that, knowing that you have to play the Gophers a bit different. And yet you kept yourself within essentially one shot from a tie hockey and maybe even a W.
Yeah, absolutely would agree. Attendance 1602 in that, so a good crowd on hand as well, which is always great to see down at Ritter Arena. Nick, I think the most encouraging thing here is St. Cloud didn't stop their momentum. We mentioned the Gophers, including their empty netter, get 2 on the Huskies in that game. St. Cloud didn't allow a goal the rest of the weekend here. Taylor Lind was listed as an extra forward. She played, of course, a fair amount of minutes in that game against the Gophers, but was kind of her last game before I think they felt that she was truly 100% and ready to go entering the course of the week and weekend, so to speak. Huskies beat Northeastern on Friday, October 20th. 2-0 was the final score, attendance of 322. This, of course, was the icebreaker tournament that we alluded to a couple weeks ago. Nick, how about this? Katie Kaufman, her second of the season from Avery Farrell and Cece Bowlby.
Nasty goal.
Yeah, at the 9:27 mark of period number 3. Then Klara Himlarova, her third of the season, an empty netter with just under 40 seconds to play in this one. Shots 30-21 in favor of the Huskies. They were outshot 8-7 in the first, but then 14-4 was the big margin. They kind of pulled the Minnesota Golden Gophers essentially in this one. Dominated the middle frame, and then 9-9 in period number 3 was a great hockey game, all things considered. 0-for-5 on the power play. You'd like to maybe see them capitalize once on special teams, but they stopped both penalty kills that they had on the other side against Northeastern. Faceoffs about even. They were 24 wins, 27 losses, so just under 500. There, again, always room for improvement in that area, I would say. But then again, this is where we talked about Taylor Lind ended up having a shot and was +1 and started to kind of get back into form fully over the course of the weekend. First one against Northeastern. In net for the Huskies, Sonia Hola, 21 of 21. She's pretty good at this goaltending thing.
Straight shutout to open the season. That is still continuing a program record. How about that, Noah? And now with Chobak getting her first shutout of the season, that's 5 shutouts already in the season combined for the Huskies. So again,
is that good?
It's all right. But again, what does that say, right? It says that although they're trying to play more offensive, and we see the scores, right? They're putting more pucks in the net. They're not doing so sacrificing having that strong defensive structure. So, I mean, when you talk about Idalski and what he wants to be in this team moving forward, right? He's doing it not at the expense of defense. He still wants that identity there, and he's still doing it, right? So it's not like before you're winning games 2-1 or maybe 1-0, and now it goes to 6-5, 7-6, right? That's never the transition you want to see. 3-0, and was it 5-0 again on Saturday? So, I mean, again, this is how you want to see that, evolution of a hockey team being more offensive, and that is not losing again, that responsibility and more of that effort on the defensive side of the puck too. So this is exactly what we want to see.
Yeah, would definitely agree. You mentioned Saturday, the Huskies took care of business 5-0 against Lindenwood was the final score there. Of course, scoring was all Huskies, in case you haven't garnered that one, including a natural hat trick from Klara Himlarova at the 8:05 mark of period number 2 on the power play, 2:24. Period number 3, also on the man advantage, and then at the 14:49 mark at even strength, Klara Himlarova getting, I think, what would be her 4th, 5th, and 6th of the season, if I can do something at the top of my head. Katie Kaufman, multi-assist game for her. Taylor Lind tallied an assist. Ella Onik, Laura Zimmerman, Sophia Sundlin, all assists on those. In the first, Huskies score a pair of goals, including 11 seconds into this one. Devin Millwater from Alice Surreal got the Huskies on the board, and Cece Bowlby with about 5 minutes left from Taylor Larson shorthanded. So, I mean, they made up for the special teams, that they maybe wanted on Friday night. It certainly was very evident as far as Saturday was concerned. Pretty dominant performance, I would say, tip to tail. I'm trying to get the shot charts here. Of course, this box score is not listed the same as the other box scores. So as far as shots on goal for Lindenwood, they ended up having 34 shots on goal, which is no slouch by any means.
No,
9 shots in the first, 7 in the second, 18 in period number 3. So Lindenwood trying to push at the tail end of this one. Huskies 13, 9, and 8 were actually outshot 34-31 in this contest. But nonetheless, JoJo Chobak, like you mentioned, saw all 34 against her and was perfect through 60 minutes. And the Huskies through 2 games were perfect, and through 3 were pretty darn close, I would say. 7-2 on the season. We mentioned the best start in program history. I would imagine this continues that trend statistically. We talked about Brian Idalski's ideology here, Nick, and we talked about his style kind of showing through in his second season. I'd say it's working to start the year.
Yeah, and before they even took the ice, right? You saw it in the moves that they made in the transfer portal. Some of the recruits that they're getting, right? It's, oh my gosh, there's some speed and skill on the offensive side coming, right? And that was the big question, right? And that is, okay, you've got on paper a different makeup, right? But can you get them to execute it? That's always the question mark when you especially have a coach that was known for defensive prowess, essentially a strong penalty kill, and taking a team that essentially tried to not do anything outside of what they were capable of. And so this team with their new makeup now has the ability to not only counterpunch, but to drive possession, to be the catalyst in offense, right? And so, the pieces are coming together, right? And I think you got to give so much credit to this coaching staff, and that's also to, past recruiters like Mira Ualuso, right? The current assistant coaches, right? You can't give enough credit to Janelle Sergey, right? Who's stuck by this program for as long as she has, right? I think that's a name that's probably not given as much credit as she probably deserves. Because, really, imagine this team under second-year Idalski trying to do what they're doing right now, but not with the names that they have, right? It's not the same. So I just think, again, like, it's just incredible what we're watching in terms of the transition. Yeah. And got to give credit where credit's due. This coaching staff up and down has done an insanely good job. And again, from the transfers and the new freshmen coming in who are out there actually executing the game plan, hell of a start of a season. We'll just put it that way. I don't know how much more simple I can make it sound. It's incredible.
It's been a great mix. We love the numbers here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Let's throw some good ones out there. Why don't we? Huskies are undefeated when scoring first. They've lost both when the opponent has scored first. So first goal clearly pivotal for them in their contest. They've only been outshot once this entire season over the course of 8 contests as well. 1-1 in 1 goal contest. So they're giving themselves a chance every night. 16% on the power play. You'd like to see that improve a little bit, I think, but 86.4% on the kill. Certainly very good on the other side of things. Plus 15 goal differential, 22-7, including an 11-1 difference in period number 3, Nick.
It's pretty good.
I would say that's not too bad. Plus 77 shot-wise, 241 to 164 for the Huskies in terms of shot differential. But here's the thing that really stands out for me, Nick. Conference-wise, 3.0 goals for, 1.33 goals against. If you keep that consistency, you will take that any day of the week. That'll buff out very well in the aggregate. Overall this season, 2.75 goals for, Nick, 0.88 goals against. That is, we mentioned goaltending. Again, I'll go back to my previous point. I think it's working.
Yeah. Yeah, to say it lightly. And, they kind of did it differently this past week. They had a whole start on Friday, only because of, I think, the Gopher game, right? Kind of had the tandem go back and forth. So for those maybe wondering why that was, they're just really switching back and forth. And then Chobak gets the start on Saturday. Well, obviously, they're not tied to a certain day of the week because they still continue their prowess. So Friday, Saturday, doesn't matter. They're not tied to one of those days. They just, as long as they get their matchup and they're looking good, teams playing well in front of them. And, that's the other thing that we got to, commend too, right? It's not always the goaltender. Granted, they're both good respectively, so not to take anything away from their performance, but I think themselves would tell an honest reporter, right, that, hey, I'm getting good help in front of us too. The shots that I'm seeing are coming from, shall we say, not high danger areas. I'm also, seeing them clean. I'm not giving up any rebounds. And when I do, they're being swept to the side. So overall, great to see those numbers for the goaltenders, but more so a good reflection on the team as a whole and the structure they're playing.
Yeah, certainly would agree. The top 2 goal scorers for the Huskies, top 3, I should say. Clara Himlerova with 9 points in the season, 6 goals, 3 assists. CC Bolby has 5, 3, and 8. And then Katie Kaufman, more of a puck distributor, 2, 6, and 8 for her. Top 2 goal scorers for the Huskies, Himlerova and Bolby, 20.7 and 25% for their shooting percentage right now. So finding the back of the net very much so. Ella Onik has 7 points, and then Avery Farrell with 6 to round out your top 5. 3 Huskies have 5 points. 3 have 4, and then you kind of start to go down the list with a couple more that are garnering points here. So certainly very good individual-wise as well, too. For this women's team, they get right back at it as far as WCHA play here. They play Mankato. You talked about the litmus test of Duluth playing the Mavericks. Now the Huskies get them, and both games for the sets for Duluth and now St. Cloud upcoming on the 27th and 28th, respectively, will both be in Mankato. So on the road, Huskies play at 6:01 Central Time on Friday the 27th, 3:01 Central Time on Saturday. So 2 games that obviously would be a tough test before they get Wisconsin the following week, and then they'll have a week off before they essentially play St. Thomas and then have another week off for the Thanksgiving holidays. So 4-game stretch here for the Huskies before they get some rest and recuperation, which, like you said, Nick, could be a good thing or bad thing depending on how this team is trending. But all eyes certainly on this team that is now 6-2 overall and 2-1 in WCHA play. Oh yeah. Yeah, sorry. I guess the last grouping hasn't updated. Yeah, it hasn't updated as far as the score. It's actually the Saturday game. It's actually yesterday's game that hasn't updated as far as the website that I'm looking at. So,
got it.
But with that being said, we're going to flip over to the men's side here. Men's hockey, a little bit of a different story. I would say Friday night, score-wise, obviously looked better than Saturday, but again, a couple of underlying things that we'll hit on throughout both of those hockey games as well. Before we get to that, though, overall, men's hockey, Michigan State took care of Canisius to start off our week on Thursday. Friday night slate, Michigan 7-1. They beat Ohio State the first night before playing to a draw last night. So that was kind of a big spread to start things out. Big one if you're an NCHC fan, Providence 4, Denver 3. And then Providence was almost upset by RPI yesterday, and Denver barely squeaked by BC that Saturday as well, too. So it could have been already are pairwise implications there, but could have been a little bit more disastrous for Denver, potentially a team that easily, I guess I shouldn't say easily, but picked early on in the season to maybe take a 1 seed into the NCAA tournament if they play the way that a lot of people expect them to. Penn State beating AIC 3-2. That was a tight contest, and AIC actually the next night on Saturday, if I can find where the score is, yes, they beat Penn State 6-4. So a split for AIC and Penn State in that one. NCHC team CC ended up sweeping Long Island 4-2 and 3-2 over the course of the weekend. Mankato and UMass went back and forth this week as well, too. Minnesota Duluth survived a scare in night number 2 against Bemidji State. They were down 3-0, ended up winning 5-4 in overtime. So again, couple of other high-scoring finishes. Friday night, it was 4-0 for the Bulldogs, so they made it look a lot easier in night number 1 compared to night number 2. Gophers, North Dakota, 4-0. The Gophers take home this one with a pair of late goals on Friday, and then Saturday, North Dakota held on for a 2-1 advantage. And I shouldn't even say held on. North Dakota was the much better team on that second night. They had a very good showing against the Gophers. I know a lot of us had eyes on that game, Nick. So. Only other scores, I guess Western Michigan ended up beating Bowling Green this weekend and Michigan Tech as well. Wisconsin had a couple of victories, including one over Tech. So again, teams continuing to trend very well. Notre Dame and BU trading wins as well, 4-1 and 8-1 either direction. So any other scores or anything that stands out that you felt like you wanted to talk through in that rundown, Nick? It'll get a lot easier for us once we don't have so many non-conference mixes, and we can see them by conference. It'll be a lot easier to kind of nail down some of these scores in a quicker rundown.
I mean, not really. Just because, I think you hit the big ones. Denver, right? Was the big one. How about BU? Yikes. Kind of ran away with the score there. Was that Saturday's game, right?
Yeah, 8-2.
Yeah, 8-2.
Yeah. And after losing 4-1 to a Notre Dame who's been up and down to start the season.
So beyond that, I think we covered the ones that I think most people paid attention to. So, but I think what we need to talk about is maybe the scores and maybe the pairwise, because I just checked. Men's hockey not sitting in a great spot in terms of the pairwise after these events.
Yeah, we'll get to the pairwise at the end of this here. Also, I guess one more to note here on Saturday, UNH, New Hampshire, actually ended up beating Quinnipiac in overtime 5-4 as well, too. So other score that we might want to pull out of this one. The Huskies, like you mentioned, men's hockey, bit of a different weekend for them. They're 2-4 in the season right now. They win on Friday night, 4-1 against Alaska. The Nanooks came to town, and it was great to see an Alaska team, be back in the building and make the travel to the 48 contiguous states, so to speak. I'm not going to comment on their uniforms, but that's all I'll say about that. Huskies do their job in the first game. 34-13 were the shots, 10-3, 7-7, 17-3. Good push to the finish there. Huskies opened the scoring with 3 goals on those 10 shots in the first period, 1 for 5 on the man advantage, and did not let Alaska score on 5 opportunities. Vieti Miettinen, his second of the season. Mason Salquist, Kyler Kupka, 5 minutes into the period. Then 5 minutes later, Nick Port. It's good to see him get his first in a Huskies uniform. Barrett Hall, Grant Deshawn tallying helpers on that one. Then Vieti Miettinen, a multi-point first period, had an assist as well as Kyler Kupka, 2 assists in the first period. Adam Ingram, his second of the season, just before the end of the period with 21 seconds remaining there. No scoring in period 2, and then in the third, Alaska gets one back at the 10-14 mark, and 3 minutes later, Joey Molinar, second of the year from Dylan Anhorn and Adam Ingram, pushed the Huskies to a 4-1 victory. Dominic Basti stopped 12 of 13. Nick, it was maybe what we were hoping, to become accustomed to, at least to start the season. Attendance of 36-26, and St. Cloud, got out to a hot start. Shooting wise, we're able to find some scoring chances in the middle of the ice, which is going to be a key discussion as we move into the next night. But you kind of maybe left Friday, Nick, I would say, as a Huskies fan, feeling all right about yourself, that they were maybe, back in the right direction, at least for that first game.
Yeah, I think, and it helps when you're up 3-0 at the first, right?
Yeah.
This team, as we've seen early, and again, we can emphasize the word early yet, just because, yes, there are definitely some things we'll break down that are concerning, that need to be cleaned up. There's no question about it. But when you get 3 goals in the first, this team is just different when they're on the board first, number one. Number two, when they have a lead, they play just a different style. And I think we're going to talk about how, this team, if they can get a multi-goal lead, and I think part of it is the youth movement, and we'll definitely touch on that a bit. They're just much more comfortable. They're much more in a cruise control setting than, shall we say, a closer game. And then I think, again, that's more indicative of a younger team that is spread throughout this lineup, especially in the forward group. But yeah, if you're a fan, I think you were happy to see that 3-0. You end up, walking with it pretty comfortably at the end of it. But I still think there was hunger there for the Huskies fans. Again, I think if you were a fan, you wanted both of these games. We'll talk that Saturday was not the result you probably wanted nor wanted to see. So I think there's still question marks from a fan's perspective in terms of where this team is and who the heck they are. But after Friday, probably feeling decent. And then you were just hoping for a repeat performance on Saturday. Unfortunately, that was not the case.
Yeah, it was not the case. Lineup card getting a little bit more consistent for the Huskies, but the scoring wise, like you mentioned, definitely not. Vieti Miettinen did open the scoring. We had to wait until period number 2. By the way, I should mention in the first game, and also actually both contests, the Huskies were above 50% in the faceoff dot. On the second night, they were 29 wins, 23 losses. So doing better in the faceoff dot at least, but possession did not lead to results in this second game. Vieti Miettinen opens the scoring with an extra attacker, his third of the season. Zach Okabe, Warren Clark at the 5:22 mark before Alaska 4-on-4 and a power play marker at the 12:04 and 18:19 mark. And all of a sudden, Alaska was suddenly ahead entering period number 3. Kyler Kupka gets one back, his second of the year on the man advantage. Vieti Miettinen and Dylan Anhorn at the 11:38 mark, able to tally points there. And from then, quick strike offense within the next 5 minutes, actually next 6 minutes. Brady Risk had 2. Power play goal, empty netter, of course, was the last one. And all of a sudden, Alaska turns a 4-2 lead into a 5-2 finish with the empty net tally. So Nick, shots 12-11 Huskies in the first. Alaska kind of came to play a little bit more in the first 20 minutes. 14-6, St. Cloud had the advantage in period number 2, despite being down 2-1 after the middle frame. And then 13-9, St. Cloud had the advantage for a 39-26 tally. Now, shots are great, Nick. Having 8 power play opportunities is really great. When you go 1 for 8 on the man advantage, give up 2 power play goals against on 5 opportunities for the Nanooks, and your 39 shots largely seem to be coming from the perimeter or getting blocked if you're on the man advantage.
Yes.
Suddenly a 4-2 / 5-2 loss kind of hurts a little bit more when statistically you should have been better, but the eye candy test didn't really match the score sheet.
No, and we talked about this before the show. To me, it's the details, right? It's those small details. And we talked about, especially in the power play, we were watching the second game live before the St. Cloud Norsemen were playing the Minotauros, right? And some of the things that I noticed, right? One, on the power play, shots were getting blocked up high from essentially the quarterback position. That cannot happen. As a defenseman there, or whoever is at essentially the pivot position, your one job is, if you're going to shoot the puck, you have to get it through. Now, if that means that it's maybe off the net, sure, but it cannot get blocked. You cannot have a shot get blocked because A, you're the only safety valve, number one. And number two, you can have a puck come out to the neutral zone that forces everybody back. That's crucial seconds ticking off. And number three, you're not testing the opposing goaltender, right? So, I didn't remember who was getting those shots blocked. Usually Anhorn, from what I saw, was getting his shots through. But again, those are small details. Number two, on the defensive side, right? On the penalty kill, you weren't blocking shots, number one. Number two, it seemed like I think it was Dominic Bassi that was in for both games, seemed to be reacting these shots late, and rebounds were there. So, it's these details that I know Brett Larson talked about it with us during our time there that will probably drive him nuts. Partly reason he's probably bald is because he's probably pulling his hair out for some of those games. Honestly, in the second game though, I mean, those are the types of, shall we say, small things that make a big difference that drives a coach nuts, right? It's those small things. And, when we talked about youth earlier, again, if you look up and down the lineup, there's freshmen in a lot of the top 9, slash roles. And, those are going to be some of those, as Brett called, this growing pains, right? And, as a team that lost some veteran presence, especially in the blue line, right? Spencer Meyer, Brennan Bushy, say what you want about maybe their offensive prowess. They were really good defensively, and, just didn't maybe were flashy, but did what they had to do in the back end to keep things in front of them. You're definitely seeing some growing pains from, say, Warren Clark, and was it Caleb Thiessen too, also on the back end. So I don't know, am I crazy, Noah, or did you see some of the same things from this Husky squad, and just, maybe some things that got away with on Friday, because again, when you're up 3-0, I think some of those kind of get overshadowed, but in a close contest, this is where, a stick check here, funneling a puck to an area there, those can make big differences. Did you notice the same things?
Yeah, Warren Clark and Carl Falk, actually. Carl Falk playing his former team for the Nanooks. The lineup card actually didn't change for the Huskies. Back end, Jack Peart, Mason Reiners, along with Jack Peart on that top pairing, Dylan Anhorn, Josh Lidke, listed as the second pairing anyway. Cooper Wiley and Warren Clark and Carl Falk, the extra defenseman. Kyler Kupka, Mason Salquist, Joey Molinar, your top line. And then Vietti and Werner were actually together throughout the course of the weekend. Zach Okabe flanking them on the right side. Adam Ingram, Tyson Gross, and Jack Rogers, your third unit. And Grant Ashawn, Barrett Hall, and Nick Ports, who I thought played really well over the course of the weekend. They were one of the bright spots in this lineup. Isaac Posh was backing up Dominic Bassi, who you mentioned. Ended up having a not great statistical night with the low volume of shots on Saturday. But yeah, Nick, I mean, it's a game where I feel like in years past, St. Cloud has been a team where if they've been statistically outplayed, and what do I mean by statistically outplayed? I mean where they're getting outshot, maybe they're getting outchanced, whatever it may be, you always felt like they were a goal or two away, or you felt like they had enough pushback where they were going to be opportunistic in games that maybe they weren't able to be the dominant team in. And then in games where they were the dominant team, even if they weren't executing to the level that you wanted. And what I mean by that is if you put up 40 shots on goal, you should be good for at least 3, maybe 4 goals on the night. I would say a goal about every 10 shots is, somewhat par for the course, give or take the goaltender in the evening. St. Cloud just didn't have that killer instinct on Saturday night. And I think that's what it comes down to is they really haven't had a group similar to what they have for the past couple of years. We mentioned guys like Yami Krannila, Grant Cruikshank last season, guys where Brett Larson could put them out for 20, 21, 25 shifts a game, depending on special teams, whatever it may be. And they were usually good for one, you know what I mean? And it's like they don't really have that grouping right now that I think he feels like, okay, they're going to be our offensive catalyst. They're going to jumpstart us. They're going to get that goal back that we need. They were good enough on Friday. The stats matched the production early on in that game. Huskies get rewarded for a great start. Nothing wrong with that. Saturday, bit of a different story. And Huskies fans, I think, even though it's disappointing that St. Cloud is well below 500 right now to start the season, it's almost a good thing because these early losses are revealing some of the innate deficiencies in this lineup that need to be cleaned up. Right now, they've got to find somebody who's going to be willing to kind of take charge with offensive production because it's only been a handful of guys and you can't, I would say Vieti Miettinen has had a great start to the season. Barrett Hall has looked all right. On the back end, it's been Dylan Anhorn, who's brought his production in, but it's like you can't rely on 2 or 3 guys only, to be those guys. And we just had the conversation. I just said they don't have anybody that stands out. Those guys come to mind. But last year it was Yami Krannila, Grant Cruikshank. Then you could name a wave of like 5 or 6 secondary guys that were also adding that production in. So you felt like within your top 9 at least that you were good for a couple a night. You get lucky, maybe get a 4th line who pops one occasionally as well too. Defenseman puts one in the back of the net as well. You felt like you had enough of a multifaceted offensive approach. St. Cloud this year right now is missing a little bit of that. On top of that, what we saw previously last weekend against Mankato is when they do have guys out there that predominantly do offer offensive production, they're having these moments where they're hemmed in their own zone and they're getting caught, trying to essentially defend the middle of the ice and that sort of thing too. So it's a hard weekend to evaluate because on one hand, Friday looked more than serviceable for the most part. Saturday definitely wasn't the Huskies' night, but again, it helps a little bit to kind of get kicked in the teeth. Last year for the Huskies, it was late January, February, maybe even early March. Look where it got them. It got them an NCHC Frozen Faceoff Championship and essentially a rolling puck away from tying the Gophers and sending that game to overtime in Fargo to push themselves to a Frozen Four. That was the wake-up call they needed. Doesn't necessarily matter when you get it, as long as it pushes you to play hockey at the right time. St. Cloud, we've talked about it, has been blessed with a great non-conference record for the past couple of years. Wake-up call might be as soon as the Girl Scouts come and knock on the door this year for the Huskies right now, because it's been a tough start for St. Cloud. Alaska, give credit to them. They came into a visiting building. They got the split. I think the Nooks team still, even with what they lost this year, is not going to be a necessarily terrible team. So curious to see what they do as well, too. If you're the Huskies, you'd like to see them be a little bit successful moving down the stretch, all things considered. I guess, Nick, what would you kind of pull away from this weekend overall besides those talking points?
The youth, right?
Yeah.
I've said it before, but, one of the things that we haven't had to deal with, and when I say we, I mean the men's hockey team, is putting youth, especially freshmen, in a position where, they're going to be in critical and eating, minute eating roles, essentially, right? And you can kind of see that, right? Also, when I mentioned this in episodes previous, but that connection with Anhorn and Cruikshank last year, that chemistry you don't grow on trees, right? And that veteran presence. And I kind of feel like, this year, yes, with Nick Ports, and, he's definitely a role player, but you don't have, as you mentioned, that veteran presence they can go to and feel like, okay, this is the people I can count on to go in and do, essentially spend some time in the offensive zone, whether it's they score or not, you kind of felt like they were always a threat, right? I think Vidi and Okabe are those guys, or are trying to be those guys, but they haven't quite gotten themselves to that level yet. And again, a lot of it is hard when you've got freshmen and lines that are trying to figure out not only their own line mates, but also trying to figure out how to play Division I college hockey and one of the toughest conferences in the nation, right? And yet they haven't even gotten a sniff at that just yet. So to your point, I do agree though that really, if they're going to have a wake up call, now it's how do we respond, right? So for St. Cloud, and I think this is going to be the big test for them is, maybe they feel like they need it better, right? But guess what? They get a week off.
Yep.
And then they have to go, and it's NCHC play, and they're playing a team that, shall we say, and I don't know if this is too early to kind of transition.
Hasn't been bad.
They have not been bad. In fact, arguably, again, non-conference wise, they've been good. We'll see what they do this weekend in their schedule. But again, we talk about the NCHC, it's going to be Miami. Let's just throw it out there. Every game matters. And sometimes it takes that one weekend, regardless of who you're playing, that it's the catalyst to maybe get you on the right track. And maybe for the Huskies, a week off is what's needed to go back and look at film and maybe work on a couple of things. Again, 1 for 8 in the power play. You got to do better than that. Again, some of it a little bit more shooting yourselves in the foot. But on the good news side, these are correctable and adjustable type things that you can fix. And maybe, maybe ask you this. Is really the answer just to simplify? Because sometimes, we hear this phrase often in hockey, right? And sometimes when you're dealing with a lot of young players in a group that's trying to figure each other out a little bit, sometimes, you have this playbook, you have the structure, you're trying to do these different things. And sometimes you take a step back, you simplify it, you get pucks on net, maybe you crash the weak side post hard. Is that really what the Huskies need to do? Maybe to find success, and then maybe introduce some more different concepts down the road. I mean, what would you do if you're the Huskies coaching staff?
I think it's a tale of two halves of the ice. And what I mean by that is I think the coaching staff, their emphasis for the young guys has to be on the defensive structure, because you have to have some sort of structure D-zone wise. That's usually what a lot of young players get caught, especially in the forward position. You get running around, you get out of position. On the other end, I totally agree with you. Simplification comes from kind of letting the horses run a little bit here. And I think that, not to say that teams in the NCHC necessarily have a structure offensively. I think they know that guys are good enough to make plays, but I think that it's more about those young guys internally trusting themselves to try to make a play. It's feeling comfortable being a little bit selfish to step towards the middle, put a puck on net. Even if it creates a rebound, you're creating an opportunity. And I think for St. Cloud, like you mentioned, you don't want to be too cute with everything. You've got to find shooting lanes defensively on the power play, got to find lanes to the net. And that's where the simplification comes from, is trusting yourself as a young hockey player to know that, hey, I'm standing here in front of the net. I don't have to be doing anything crazy to be disruptive. I have to create a screen. Maybe I get a puck on or a stick on a puck and create a tip or a deflection, or I'm there for the rebound. It doesn't have to be anything fancy or flashy. It just has to be in the right position. A lot of that is like natural hockey IQ, just trusting what how to go to the net. A lot of these guys, they've been the guy at their previous, USHL teams, whatever it's been, or they've been one of the more relied upon players at their position. Trust that process a little bit, especially on the offensive side. I think that once you get guys, get the feeling of scoring or creating chances, creating assists, power play, even strength, whatever it is, guys start to feel like they can produce on their chances. And then you don't feel like, oh, we went down, we missed this opportunity offensively. Now we're in our D zone and we can't let one in. We can't let one in because then we're going to have such a tough time getting back in this game. So I agree with you in that sense, where the simplification is just getting pucks on net, going to the dirty areas, simple opportunities. And then it'll come where you create the chemistry, you create the opportunity, and guys are going to be able to find the back of the net. But I agree, it's going to be a good test this week. This week for Miami, I should say, who's 3-1 in the season. They get Arizona State, who has not lost. They're 4-0. They swept Merrimack and Northern Michigan, had that blowout exhibition game against Arizona, of course. Miami lost in overtime to Ferris before beating them 5-2, and they swept Canisius with an 8-3 aggregate score. So Huskies will get a good look. I would say the week off maybe couldn't have come at a better time for this men's hockey team to kind of reset and retool. I guess running running through the numbers here, Nick, team-wise, obviously, 3 of the 6 games the Huskies have played in, they're 1-2 in them, but 3 of the 6 have been 1-goal games. So it's not like they've been getting shellacked every game, which I think is encouraging overall. Goal differential right now is -5, 19-14 respectively. Huskies still are out shooting their opponent by 23 shots respectively. But they've been giving up a goal more per game, and that's kind of been the difference maker for the Huskies. St. Cloud has started games very well this season on the men's side, and they've slowly trailed off as games have gone on. Not typical of Brett Larson's Huskies in recent years. It's usually been the opposite. Power plays at 20%, PKs at 80%, both numbers in the NCHC that they're not going to wow you, but they're usually serviceable. I'm not going to sit here and say that St. Cloud has been doing everything wrong and that they haven't been a victim of poor timing, poor puck luck. That Saturday against Mankato, they have 2 goals in quick succession early in the second period. Suddenly they're down 3-0. But it's just, like you said, those little things, those little details that in the aggregate, the hockey gods favor you if you're willing to sometimes create your own luck a little bit. Right now, St. Cloud just hasn't had a touch of that. I mean, I guess from your perspective, Nick, how much of that do you think goes into the Huskies themselves, and especially these young guys still kind of finding their way around? How much of this is more like coaching staff related? And then third parameter of the trifecta, how much of this is just like hockey gods need to give the boys a bounce a little bit too?
So I think to get a hockey bounce, right, you need to be good enough to earn a bounce sometimes. I don't think St. Cloud has been good enough yet to earn a bounce, right? And, you talked Saturday Mankato. How about Friday? They were up 2-0, let that slip away. That is not going to earn you a hockey bounce, right? So that is, sticking to being the aggressor and being on your toes instead of your heels, right? And I think a lot of it, actually, I would say 80% of it is the youth. I really do. Here's the good news. You rambled off stats. Only a -5 on the year. Yeah. They're a bunch of 1-goal games. That means they're close. Right. So it's not like, the alarm bells are, we're about to put the nuclear codes in, just yet. Although if you ask some Wild fans, they're about ready to punch those numbers in, yesterday.
Yeah. Well, you can't give up 54 shots to Columbus. Just throwing that out there.
No, you can't do that. So there's, they actually might have more of an argument for those codes versus the St. Cloud fans. So what does that tell us, Noah? That tells us that, yes, I think it's less than the coaching staff. And again, when you've got a lot of youth in the lineup, right, it is a slow build of putting them into different situations, to introducing more concepts, to get him to be, shall we say, serviceable at the Division I level. I'm not sure how else to phrase it, right? Because you don't want to throw the book at him right away, because then all of a sudden hockey's played so fast nowadays that if you're thinking too much when you have the puck or before you have it, you're already losing the game, right? You have to act on instinct. You have to be able to know what you're going to do with the puck before it ever gets to your stick. You have to be able to read and react. And so it's a tough position for the coaching staff, because you're trying to get into play Husky hockey. But again, the transition time, especially with a lot of youth, is a little bit slower. And I think Brett Larson honestly would tell us the same thing, is that, we're trying to build this program. We're trying to get these young guys assimilated. It doesn't happen overnight. So the good news is they're close games. The bad news is, again, in years past, as recently as last year, right, 6-0 in non-conference, sometimes it's been a buoy for maybe some of the NCHC, shall we say, turns of fate as they had with injuries and, other things in years past. You're not going to have that this year. It just isn't. But to your point, sometimes you got to go through the tough stretches early. Huskies are going to have that this year. And now, can they use that as motivation, and can they learn just a little bit more every week to get themselves into a position where, if you're going to have your ups and downs, you want to have your ups like last year, towards March, heading into tournament time. Now, the problem is for St. Cloud, and I'm going to ask you this, Noah, to kind of go back at you, and this is, is there enough room right now with a 2-4 record where they're kind of running out of real estate / runway to have these sort of teaching moments, more for their pairwise implications, and more so too, I mentioned alarm bells. I don't think that there are, reasons to go too crazy yet, but I do think there's causes of concern for Huskies fans that I think are legitimate where are we at? Are we at DEFCON Delta? Are we DEFCON Alpha? Where are we at with the season? I do think, it's gut check time when they do play Miami in a couple of weeks. I don't know, what's your gut telling you?
Well, first of all, my gut's telling me that this Miami team might not be as bad as we thought. First of all, we'll have to see. If you want to be technical, Arizona State is the number 1 team in the country, according to the Pairwise. But with that being said, Huskies have 6 matchups before the turn of the calendar year, 5 before the holiday break. It's Miami, Western, Duluth, Michigan, Omaha, Bemidji to round out through December 31st. Okay. I would say at least 3 of those series you would like to be 500 or better, at least.
Yeah.
I would say if you get 4 of those 6, you feel good about yourself. I think Bemidji is an opponent that they have a chance to handle. Miami, of course, historically they have. Omaha, it's anyone's guess. Duluth, it's anyone's guess. That Western team's going to be all right. Michigan, of course, is going to be good. So honestly, I'm kind of with you. I'm not saying they're running out of real estate, but the homes are selling quickly in Huskies land here. They've got to figure it out. They've got a week and a half to figure it out. I think Miami is maybe the last kind of litmus test for you to figure out what you need. I wouldn't be shocked if Western Michigan gives you a good game. I would like to see them take both against Duluth. I think if from a defensive perspective, that's going to be a good challenge of, are we good enough defensively to win a game 4-1 against a team that has given up a lot but also scored a lot? So Duluth will be interesting in that. I would say by the time we hit the end of next month, November, by pretty much a month from now, by the time they play Michigan over the holidays, we're going to have a very clear picture, I feel like, of how this Huskies team has kind of either resolved themselves or how long the season might be.
Right.
Honestly, as far as statistical leaders here, Dominic Bassi, of course, has played all but 14 minutes of the 140 total for these Huskies, 2-4 in 6 contests. He's allowed 16, a 2.98 goals against, and an 8.87 save percentage. Certainly not good enough by his standards, but I don't know that he's necessarily had help or luck on his side as far as turnovers and other things too. So keep that in mind. Your leader by points is Vieti Mietinen, who, credit him, in his senior year has been everything I would say the Huskies have asked for the most part throughout the first 6 games. 3 goals, 4 assists. He's your team leader in goals. Tied for the team lead in assists. Dylan Anhorn has 4 assists as well. He's got 5 points, as does Adam Ingram, who, of course, has been a bright spot. We talked about him at the sophomore level having to produce and be effective. He's certainly done that. Shooting percentage of 25% for him. Kyler Kupka, Barrett Hall, each with 4 points. And then the rest of the Huskies, you've got 5, maybe 6 guys with 2 points and 4 of them with a single point. And that's about it for this group. So, I mean, you're looking for a little bit more offensively for this group as they get ready for 3 NCHC weekends in a row after a week off. That game on November 3rd and 4th, respectively, 7:30 and 6 o'clock Central Times. That one, of course, will be at the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center in St. Cloud. So Huskies could definitely use the energy here as they try to reset after a week and a half off. Pairwise time here, Nick, I think, to kind of round things out. Arizona State, we mentioned it, is the top team in the country right now. As far as NCHC teams, Western Michigan is at 3, Miami's at 4, North Dakota's at 6, CC at 7, the Gophers right behind them at 8. For reference there, Michigan, who the Huskies will see next month, at 12 currently. Top 16, the number 16 spot is occupied by the Wisconsin Badgers. So speaking of Mankato, I'm guessing
28.
Yeah, Duluth's at 23, Mankato's at 28, correct? The Nanooks, if anyone was curious, is at 30. So to give you some reference, and then St. Cloud 41 right now, right in between Lindenwood and LIU, which, 2 teams that didn't really have a Division I program if you go back a couple of years, respectively. So there's room for improvement. I think that's the easy thing to be said here, Nick. Do you kind of have a final takeaway for this men's team?
Yeah, I think, the coaching staff's got their hands full.
Yeah.
But if you're a Huskies fan and you're, stable emotionally, which can't say that, oh goodness.
Are we stable emotionally?
Yes. Right. And what I mean is, we're not ready to jump off a cliff, but you got to feel confident that you have the right coaching staff to turn around a program that is maybe struggling a bit, right? They did it last year. Granted, it's a different roster. It's a different makeup. I get that. But mind you, they lost arguably their best catalyst, at probably the worst time. And it took them a little bit of time, but they figured it out, right? Brett Larson, he's got, the blue collar work ethic mentality. He's going to have these guys work over the next week and a half. So at the end of it, if you are looking for a bright spot, you have Brett Larson, you've got Dave Shayak, you've got RJ Enga, right? You've got a very committed, passionate group of coaches that historically, to me, hasn't gotten enough credit that they deserve for what they have to work with and the results that they've gotten. And mind you, this is the second round of a wave of babies that this team has tried to endure over the past, 4 years now. So it's a challenge, but I think this coaching staff will tweak some things. I think they will definitely get some of the young guns up to speed over the next 10 days or so, and to be ready for Miami, right? Because at the end of the day, they have to be. We have to see improvement in Miami. If we don't, shall we? I don't know. We'll obviously have to dissect it then, but it could be a longer season if we don't see, significant improvement in some areas. So am I worried? Sure. Am I ready to, set sail and, over into the sunsets from the season? Not yet. But there's definitely some things that need to be cleaned up. I think that they can clean them up. And, we talked about it before. This coach staff is good enough to do it. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, you talk about bright spots. Let's not forget, from January 27th of last season until March 3rd, I should say actually March 4th is when they started their winning streak, where they started to kind of get back on track, which was that Saturday in March, first weekend in March. Actually, right before they got ready for the NCHC quarterfinals is what it was. They had a stretch, the Huskies did, where out of 9 contests, they only won 1 in regulation. They lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those 9 games, and the 3 other victories they got, they were shootout wins. 2 of those against Miami and the 3rd against North Dakota. So there have been blips in the past where it's taken the Huskies a little bit to kind of sort out their issues and their woes. But I certainly agree with you to kind of counterpoint your statement a little bit. We certainly believe in the coaching staff, as we always have. We've had discussions in years past where it's like, you kind of have to get through the slump. You kind of have to get through the challenges and that sort of thing. We've always, I think for some fans, even annoyingly so, have been more on the side of give it a chance, let the Huskies work it out. They're going to be just fine. I think I'll be the first to say that this year has felt a little different to start. This is definitely more of a, we're not a little bit concerned or they need to tweak this a little bit. We're a fair amount concerned. 6 games into the season, it hasn't been very pretty. But again, Nick, I'm with you. For another month, we're not going to really know the answer to that question. Good news is Huskies have almost 2 weeks to figure it out, remedy it, take a look at their opponent who's playing a very good team in Arizona State this upcoming week, and hopefully bring your best, leave your worst hockey in the month of October. Let's just put it that way. So, should be good, Nick. We'll be here to cover it as always. Episode 186 coming out next week. Women's hockey, of course, back in action this upcoming week as well, too, Nick. So we'll have women's hockey recaps for you next week. We'll discuss a little bit more in depth about the men's team as well next week, and maybe think of something creative as well to talk about a team that will be off for their bye week early on here in the season on the men's side. For Nick Maxon, I'm Noah Grant, and we will see you soon in the den.
One-timer, come in, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL!
Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.